My name is Holger Zellentin. I'm a professor at the University of Tübingen. I've been there for a few years now. I've teaching in Cambridge and Nottingham before, and before that in the United States. And the book I want to introduce today is called Law Beyond Israel, From the Bible to the Quran. It's an attempt to show the kind of the prehistory of Quranic law. That means the ways in which the law as conceived of in the Hebrew Bible has come down to the Quran. And of course, the continuity as such is kind of obvious and banal. It has, Quran is very open about this continuity. But of course, historically, the way in which the law itself has been transmitted and has been inflected by Jewish and Christian communities, that's what this book is about. And the surprising summary might be that the book is actually showing, or attempting to show at least, I found it convincing, others will have to judge themselves, that the Quran stands in continuity with the Hebrew Bible as it is addressed to non-Jews. That's why they're beyond Israel, and I'll say more about that later. And it also tries to show how the Christian interpretation of the Hebrew Bible, it really is the main framework for the Quranic attempt to recast Islamic law. And so we've got the Christian interpretation of the Hebrew Bible on the one hand, and then of course local Arabian custom, which also plays a big role in the Quranic law. Book itself has a very long opening, the book, and it which tries to give the overviews of a number of legal narratives and concepts that really connect the Bible and the Quran. And something that will then be played out throughout the chapters is the idea that there is this law for non-Jews, non-Israelites to be precise, the Gerim, like Arabic jar, neighbors, the Gerim in the Holy Land. And the individual chapters, they implement that and show how the law reached the Hebrew Bible. I have previously written on the broader sense of the Ten Commandments and the main part of Israelite law, how that's really reaches the Quran also through a Christian intermediary, and I would say West Syrian Christianity is most important here, but also Byzantine law is quite important. Rabbinic law is always there, but less so. So the rabbis, of course, receive, but the Quran really positions itself more closely to Christian law, but also independent of it. So it's clearly a continuity, but also it's a clear innovation in a sense, and that's the right term because it's a new community that's here being formed, of course, in continuity with many precedents. Now, the chapters then focus on specific aspects of law, and the book tries to follow the laws given to the non-Israelites, residents of the Holy Land. And the most important laws are pertaining to blood, consumption of blood. That's chapter 1, and it starts with Noah, the prohibition of eating blood given to Noah. That then in Christian theology is connected with the danger of demons, so very specifically. And of course, that includes all the food laws that derive from that. And here, I think it will be surprising to many readers that Christians were extremely strict about avoiding blood and carrion throughout late antiquity. In Eastern Christianity, of course, that is persistent to this day. And it is just part of Western Christianity that eventually dropped these laws. So that's the first chapter, but with a focus on the development from the Hebrew Bible through Second Temple Judaism, up through late antique Christianity, taking the rabbinic and Second Temple Jewish record into account, but arguing for the prominence of the Christian record. The second chapter then is about the sexual regulations, which are also quite central in the Quran, and that is based on Leviticus 18, the various regulations for sexual intercourse. And the third chapter then takes the specific case study of the incest laws, which are, of course, from Leviticus 18. And in both cases, or in all three cases, the food laws, the broader sexual laws, then the incest laws, it's quite clear that Christianity as such did very much receive all of this with the specific idea that is part also of the decree of the apostles. And it then, of course, was as such, it's quite a broad body of law, even though it's just food law and sexual laws. It is actually quite important, also for latent Christianity. And then the final chapter is trying to summarize the way in which law as a whole is understood in these three traditions. And there's also a case study there on the Roman context. And I've been looking at a recent work that compares the Quran's punishments with those of the Byzantine Empire. And here I think that the practices of the Ghassanid and the Lahmids in northern Arabia are also quite important. That the Quran here stands in continuity again with Byzantine and Christian law again, but not with the law as conceived of by say the Justinian Code, but by actual practices and on the land. And here the Quran locates itself in continuity, but also independently from Christian practice. And that's the conclusion. The inspiration was somewhat misguided. I'm very glad I was misguided. I'm by training, I'm a Talmudist, somebody working on rabbinic Judaism first and foremost. And I had always tried to understand the ways in which the rabbis relate to the environments, which, of course, in Israel and Palestine is the Byzantine Empire. In Caesarea, it's not the Sasanian authority so much, but also the Syrian Christians. And I tried to work out how the rabbis relate to the Christians. That was my question. And I thought, well, how does law come into all this? Like, what do Christians actually do? So I started thinking about Christian law. And I thought I could use the Quran as one of those ways in which there's also continuity with either Jewish or Christian law. And of course, I expected it to be Jewish law. I looked at the so-called Noahide commandments. I tried to see like how the Quran would relate to the Hebrew Bible. But time and again, when I honed in on these questions, it was emerged that the Christian law is much more prominent, even though in historical memory Christians did away with the law. That's actually not the case at all. There's, especially in the Syrian tradition, there's this idea of primary law, which is eternal, which is not touched by Jesus' abrogation. And that's also a narrative that we get in the Quran. So I was actually trying to answer a very different question, but it turned out that I then became quite enthralled by the complexity and the uniqueness of the Quran's stance on law, and have asked many other questions in between. And I'm working now as much on the Quran as I do work on rabbinic Judaism. So currently I am working on a project that tries to go back to my original question in a sense, using the Quran to learn more about rabbinic Judaism. And that's kind of a turning of the tables on the historical inquiries about the Quran, because usually the Quran is then by Western historians read in light of Christianity, in light of Judaism. And I thought, well, the engagement of the Quran with rabbinic Judaism is so intricate. There are so many traditions, rabbinic traditions, that are reflected in the Quran, to which the Quran responds. There's knowledge, but there's also explicit criticism of rabbinic practices. And the Quran is in no way anti-Jewish, but it does really take the rabbis to task for what it conceives of as their failings. And so the level of precision is such that I think it's quite possible to draw a picture of the Jews, the types of Jews that with which the Quranic community stood in contact. And I think that already starts in Mecca, even though I don't believe there were residents there, but they were well known. And of course, in Medina, you've got this really close encounter. And my working hypothesis is that it is actually A, rabbinic Judaism that you can see through the Quran, and B, it is also more specifically the Palestinian rabbinic tradition that is most important and perhaps exclusively important for the Quran's description of Judaism. That so the Babylonian Talmud would be not as central there, which would be a very surprising, if that is correct, if I can confirm that, would be a surprising find, and would help us put a Palestinian inflected Jewish community on the map in Arabia at the turn of the 7th century. So that would be quite fascinating, A, for the understanding the Quran in a historical context, but it would also, I think, be a real contribution to Jewish studies, because it would be, we would have a new document that would actually help us understand the development of the rabbinic movement and tensions between the Palestinian and the Babylonian rabbinic communities. So that's my project, and I hope I'll be able to finish that in the next few years.